The champagne glasses clinked around me, but all I could hear was my daughter's voice cutting through the summer air like a knife through silk. We stood on the dock of my lake house in Wilmington, North Carolina, surrounded by family and friends who'd gathered for what Nicole called a celebration. The late afternoon sun cast golden light across the water, the same water where my husband James had taught our daughter to sail 30 years ago. The same dock where he'd kissed me goodbye 2 years ago before his heart gave out on a morning fishing trip. "Mom," Nicole said, her hand clasped tightly in Brandon's, her smile bright but somehow hollow. "We wanted you all to know that Brandon and I are getting married, and we've made an exciting decision about the future of Hayes Marine Restoration." My breath caught. The workshop, James's legacy, the business he'd built from nothing over 40 years. Restoring classic boats with hands that could sand wood smooth as glass and see beauty in things others had given up on. Brandon stepped forward, his voice smooth and confident. "Eleanor's been managing the property alone for 2 years now. It's too much for her at her age. So Nicole and I are taking over operations. We're going to modernize everything, bring it into the 21st century. We've already got buyers interested in the waterfront land. It's worth almost $2 million now." The dock seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Sell the land, sell James's workshop, the place where he'd restored the 1,947 Chris-craft that now sat in our boat slip, where he'd taught neighborhood kids woodworking for free, where his laughter had echoed across the water every single day for decades. My brother Thomas's hand gripped my shoulder. His voice was low, dangerous. "What do you mean, taking over? This isn't your property, Brandon. You've known my niece for what, 8 months?" Brandon's smile never wavered. "Eleanor knows she can't manage this alone. The business is bleeding money. The building needs repairs. She's drowning in property taxes. We're helping her." I wanted to speak, to tell everyone that I'd never agreed to any of this, that I didn't even know they were looking at buyers, that the business wasn't bleeding money at all. But shock had stolen my voice. All I could do was stand there, watching my daughter's fiancé announce plans to dismantle everything James had built, everything we'd protected together, while Nicole smiled beside him like he was offering me salvation instead of destruction. Thomas's voice cut through my silence. "Show me the paperwork, Brandon. Show me where Eleanor signed anything giving you authority over her property." Brandon's expression flickered, just for a moment. "It's complicated. Business structures, liability issues. Eleanor needs our help, whether she admits it or not." And that's when I finally found my voice, because I realized something in that moment, something that made my blood run cold. This wasn't just about the business. This was about control, about money, about 2 people who saw a vulnerable widow as an opportunity rather than a person. "Get off my dock," I said quietly. "Both of you." But before I tell you what happened after those words, before I tell you how a summer celebration turned into a battle for everything I had left, you need to understand how we got here. Because this story didn't start with Brandon's announcement on my dock. It started 18 months earlier, with grief, loneliness, and a daughter I thought I knew but had somehow lost along the way. When James died, everything stopped. We'd been married 44 years. He was my best friend, my business partner, my anchor. The morning they found him in his boat, his fishing rod still in his hand, and the sunrise painting the lake pink and gold, a part of me died too. For months, I moved through the house like a ghost. The workshop stayed locked. His coffee mug sat unwashed by the sink for 3 weeks before I could bring myself to touch it. Nicole came immediately when it happened. She held me through the funeral, helped sort through paperwork, stayed for 2 weeks. I was grateful. She'd been going through her own hell, a messy divorce from Mark that left her with a 6-year-old daughter, Emma, and mountains of legal fees. When she left to go back to Charlotte, the house felt even emptier than before. But then she started calling more. Weekly at first, then several times a week. "How are you doing, Mom?" she'd ask, her voice soft with concern. "Are you eating? Are you sleeping?" I appreciated it. I thought grief had brought us closer. that maybe losing her father had reminded her how precious family was. We drifted apart over the years, the way mothers and daughters sometimes do. But now, she was back, and I was grateful for it. 6 months after James died, she came for Thanksgiving with Emma. "I met someone, Mom," she said over pie. Her eyes were bright for the first time since her divorce. "His name is Brandon Cole. He's a business consultant. He's been helping me get back on my feet financially." I was happy for her. God knows she deserved happiness after what Mark had put her through. "I'd love to meet him," I said. Brandon arrived for Christmas. Tall, handsome, in his mid-40s with gray just starting at his temples. He had an easy smile and said all the right things. He complimented my home, spoke respectfully about James's work, played gently with Emma. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, shaking my hand with both of his. "Nicole's told me so much about you. You've built something really special here." Over dinner, he asked questions about the business. How many boats did we restore a year? What was the property worth? Were there outstanding debts? I answered, thinking he was just making conversation, being interested in his girlfriend's family history. "You know," he said carefully, "there are ways to modernize operations. Cut costs. Maybe even expand. I work with family businesses all the time. I could take a look at your books if you'd like, just as a favor." Something in my chest tightened, but I pushed it away. He was trying to be helpful. Nicole was happy. I should be grateful. After they left, I found a business card on the kitchen counter. Brandon Cole, Business Development Consultant. Below it, in his handwriting, "Anytime you need advice, I'm here." The new year brought changes I didn't ask for and didn't understand until much later. Nicole started coming down every other weekend, always with Brandon. At first, it was nice. The house felt less empty. Emma's laughter filled the rooms. But then I started noticing things. Brandon would walk around the property with a notebook, taking photos, measuring things. "Just curious about the layout," he'd say when I asked. He'd spend hours in James's office, looking through files. "Nicole said you needed help organizing," he'd explain. Nicole's questions became pointed. "Mom, do you really need all this space? The property taxes must be killing you. Have you thought about downsizing?" I hadn't thought about it. This was my home. James and I had bought this land when it was just woods and water, before Wilmington became fashionable, before developers started offering millions for waterfront property. We'd built this house together, plank by plank. The workshop held 40 years of his craftsmanship, tools he'd collected, boats in various stages of restoration that people had entrusted to his care. "I'm not leaving," I said simply. Nicole's expression shifted, something I couldn't quite read. "Of course not now, Mom. But eventually. You're going to be 68 this year. What happens when you can't maintain this place? When something breaks and you can't fix it?" Brandon appeared in the doorway. "Nicole's just worried about you, Eleanor. We both are. Managing a business at your age, especially alone. It's a lot of responsibility. At my age." The words stung more than they should have. I was 67, not ancient. I still worked in the garden, still walked 3 miles every morning, still kept James's books balanced to the penny. But somehow, in their eyes, I'd become someone who needed saving. Over the following months, their visits increased. And with each visit, they pushed harder. "You should see what the land is worth now," Brandon would say, showing me real estate listings on his phone. 2 million, maybe more. You could sell this place. Buy something smaller. Live comfortably for the rest of your life. "But I am comfortable," I'd reply. "Are you though?" Nicole would counter. "When's the last time you took a vacation? When's the last time you didn't worry about business expenses? Mom, you're burning yourself out trying to keep Dad's dream alive. But it was his dream, not yours." That cut deep. Because she was right about one thing. The business was James's dream, but she was wrong about everything else. Keeping it alive wasn't burning me out. It was keeping me alive. Every boat I helped restore, every customer I welcomed into the workshop, every time I ran my hand along the smooth wood of a newly sanded hull, I felt James beside me. This wasn't just his dream. It had become ours. But Nicole and Brandon were relentless. They'd arrive with spreadsheets, with concerns, with suggestions that always led to the same conclusion. Sell the property, liquidate the business, simplify my life. We found a lovely senior community in Raleigh. Nicole said one afternoon. 8 months into her relationship with Brandon, she spread glossy brochures across my kitchen table. Active adult living. You'd have friends, activities, no property to maintain. I stared at the photos of smiling elderly people playing shuffleboard, of tidy apartments with no history, no soul. I don't want to live in Raleigh, I said quietly. I want to live here. Brandon leaned back in his chair. Eleanor, we're trying to help you. The business lost $15,000 last year. The workshop roof needs replacing. The dock is rotting. You're sitting on a gold mine but living like you're broke. It doesn't make sense. The business didn't lose money, I said, my voice steady. We broke even, which was the goal during the rebuilding year after James passed. And I have a contractor coming next month for the roof. I'm managing just fine. His smile was patient, condescending. Are you just being stubborn? Thomas had warned me. My brother had driven down from Raleigh after Nicole's third visit with Brandon. There's something off about that guy, he'd said, sitting on this same dock where they'd later make their announcement. He asks too many questions. Did you run a background check on my daughter's boyfriend? I'd laughed it off. Thomas, you're being paranoid. Maybe, he'd said. But humor me. Let me have Catherine look into him. Catherine Ross had been James's attorney and a family friend for 20 years. She'd helped us structure the business, write our wills, navigate every legal challenge that had come our way. Thomas trusted her completely, but I'd said no. I didn't want to seem like the controlling mother, the one who couldn't let her daughter be happy. Besides, Nicole seemed happy. Brandon was attentive to her, good with Emma, respectful to me even if his suggestions grated. Maybe I was the one with the problem, still too deep in grief to accept help when it was offered. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot of things. But I wouldn't realize just how wrong until I found the documents hidden in James's desk drawer, until I understood that Brandon's interest in my business had nothing to do with helping and everything to do with taking. The documents appeared 3 weeks before the dock announcement. I'd been looking for an old boat registration when my hand brushed against a folder wedged in the back of James's filing cabinet. Inside was a property appraisal request dated just 2 weeks earlier. My name was on it, my address, my signature. Except I'd never signed it. I'd never requested an appraisal. The signature was close, but not quite right. The loop in the H of Hayes was too round. I'd been signing my name for 67 years. I knew every curve. My hands shook as I pulled out the rest of the contents. There were more documents, a business valuation estimate, a consultation agreement with a development company interested in waterfront commercial conversion opportunities, and most damning of all, a power of attorney form with my signature, giving Nicole legal authority to make financial decisions on my behalf. I'd never signed that either. I sat on the floor of James's office for an hour. These papers spread around me like evidence of a crime I hadn't known was being committed. All of them had been filed in the last 3 months. All of them bore signatures that weren't mine but were close enough that if you didn't know better, if you weren't looking closely, you'd think they were legitimate. The phone rang. It was Nicole. Hey Mom, we're planning to come down this weekend. Brandon has something exciting to share with you about the business. Can you have Uncle Thomas there too? We want the whole family to hear this. My voice came out flat. What kind of exciting news? You'll see. Trust me, Mom. This is going to change everything. She was right about that part. I called Thomas the moment she hung up. I need you to bring Catherine, I said. And don't tell Nicole you're coming. That weekend became the longest of my life. I spent it preparing, gathering evidence, making copies of every document I'd found. Catherine arrived Friday night. When I showed her the papers, her expression went from concern to furious in the space of a heartbeat. Eleanor, this is fraud, she said flatly. These signatures were forged. Someone's been setting up to steal your property. She pulled out her laptop. Let me run that background check on Brandon Cole. What she found made my blood run cold. Brandon Cole had filed for bankruptcy twice. He'd been sued by 3 different business partners for financial mismanagement. And most damning of all, 5 years ago, an elderly woman in Virginia had filed a restraining order against him after he'd manipulated his way into her finances through her son. The case had been settled out of court, but the court documents Catherine pulled up painted a picture of a man who made his living by exploiting vulnerable people. Thomas read over her shoulder, his face darkening. He's done this before. He found another lonely widow through her kid and tried to take everything. Not tried, Catherine corrected. According to these documents, he succeeded. She sold her property and moved into assisted living. He and the son split the proceeds. I thought I might be sick. Nicole wouldn't. She's my daughter. She wouldn't help someone steal from me. Catherine's voice was gentle. She might not realize what she's doing. Men like Brandon are experts at manipulation. He probably convinced her this is in your best interest, that they're saving you from yourself. What do? I whispered. First, we wait, Catherine said. Let them make their announcement tomorrow. Let them show their hand. Then we show them James's will. What about James's will? Catherine smiled, but there was no humor in it. Your husband was smarter than any of us knew. After his father died and his sister tried to contest the estate, James added specific protections to his will. Did you know that? I shook my head. He created what's called a legacy protection trust. The property, the business, all of it is held in a trust that you control. But if anyone tries to coerce you, manipulate you, or forge documents to take control, the trust has automatic safeguards. Any attempted transfer becomes void. Any party involved in the attempt is permanently barred from inheritance. And all decisions about the property and business revert solely to you, with oversight from myself as trustee. I don't understand. Why didn't he tell me? He did. 5 years ago when he had it drawn up. But you were both healthy, busy. It probably didn't seem important at the time. She pulled out a thick folder. But James was protecting you. He knew that if anything happened to him, someone might try to take advantage. He just never imagined it might be Nicole. Neither had I. But as the evening shadows grew long across the lake, as I sat on my porch with Thomas and Catherine going through legal strategies, I realized something. I'd been blind, not just to Brandon's manipulation, but to my daughter's transformation. The girl who'd spent summers on this dock learning to tie bowlines and sand teak, the woman who'd cried in my arms when her father died, had somehow become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who looked at her childhood home and saw dollar signs instead of memories. The next morning, they arrived with champagne and news of celebration. And when Brandon stood on my dock and announced his plans to sell my husband's legacy, when Nicole smiled like she was doing me a favor, I knew it was time to stop being the grieving widow they thought was too weak to fight back. After I told them to get off my dock, the silence was absolute. Even the water seemed to stop moving. Nicole's smile cracked. Mom, what are you talking about? We're trying to help you. Help me? My voice was steady now, strengthened by the truth Catherine had revealed. By forging my signature, by requesting property appraisals I never authorized, by filing a power of attorney I never signed. Brandon's expression shifted, the friendly mask slipping for just a moment. Eleanor, I think you're confused. The stress of managing everything alone, it's affecting your judgment. My judgment is fine. I pulled the folder from behind the dock railing where I'd hidden it that morning. These are copies of documents filed with county records over the last 3 months. All with my signature, except I never signed any of them. Nicole stepped forward. Mom, you probably just forgot. You've been so overwhelmed lately. I know my own signature, Nicole, and I know when someone's trying to steal from me. Brandon's voice hardened. Those are serious accusations. You should be careful about what you're saying. Should I? Thomas stepped forward, his phone in his hand. Because I'm recording this conversation, and I'm very curious to hear you explain how you obtained power of attorney over my sister's finances when she never gave it to you. The other guests, our neighbors and friends who'd gathered for this celebration, began murmuring. I could see phones coming out, people taking photos of the documents I held. Brandon reached for Nicole's hand. We should go. Your mother is clearly not well. Actually, Catherine's voice came from the porch steps, calm and professional. Everyone should stay. Mrs. Hayes, may I? I nodded, handing her the folder. Catherine had practiced law for 30 years. She knew how to command a room. My name is Catherine Ross. I'm the Hayes family attorney and the trustee of James Hayes's estate. What Mr. Cole doesn't know is that 2 years ago, before he died, James Hayes created a legacy protection trust specifically designed to prevent what's happening here today. She pulled out her own documents, holding them up for everyone to see. This property and business cannot be sold, transferred, or placed under anyone else's control without Eleanor Hayes's explicit, notarized consent. Any attempt to do so through fraud, coercion, or manipulation immediately triggers protective clauses in the trust. Brandon's face had gone pale. I don't know what you think you've uncovered, but Nicole and I were only trying to help manage an estate that was becoming too much for Eleanor to handle alone. Then perhaps you can explain this, Catherine said, pulling out another document. This is a bankruptcy filing from Brandon Cole, dated 6 years ago. And this is a restraining order filed against Brandon Cole by Margaret Price of Richmond, Virginia, after Mr. Cole attempted to defraud Mrs. Price of her property through her son. The settlement included a prohibition on Mr. Cole working with or targeting elderly individuals for financial services. The murmurs became gasps. I watched my daughter's face, saw the moment comprehension dawned. Brandon? Her voice was small, confused. What is she talking about? Nicole, don't listen to them. They're trying to turn you against me because they're afraid of change. But Catherine wasn't finished. I have copies of email exchanges between Mr. Cole and several development companies, discussing the sale of this property and the splitting of proceeds. These emails date back 9 months, to just 1 month after you started dating Nicole Hayes Morrison. Thomas's voice was ice. You targeted my niece. You found out she was going through a divorce, vulnerable, and you used her to get to her mother's property. Brandon's mask was completely gone now. What remained was cold, calculating. You can't prove any of that. Those documents could be fake. And even if they're not, Nicole is an adult. She has every right to be concerned about her mother's welfare and future care needs. Does she have the right to forge legal documents? Catherine asked. Because these signatures were witnessed by someone. And when we track down that someone, when we subpoena the records from the notary whose stamp appears on these forms, we're going to find out exactly who committed fraud here. Nicole's hand went to her mouth. Oh my God. Mom, I didn't forge anything. Brandon said you'd signed these months ago, that you'd wanted help but were too proud to ask for it directly. He said you asked him to handle the paperwork, and you believed him? Thomas said. Your mother, who built this business with her own hands, who's been managing it successfully for 2 years since Dad died, suddenly couldn't handle her own affairs? She seemed so alone, Nicole whispered, tears starting to fall. So overwhelmed. Brandon said we could take the burden off her, that she could relax. Enjoy her retirement. He made it sound like we were helping. By selling her home? Thomas's voice cracked with anger. By liquidating Dad's legacy? By putting her in a senior facility in Raleigh? That's not help, Nicole. That's theft. Brandon moved toward the dock stairs. I don't have to listen to these accusations. Nicole, let's go. Actually, Catherine said, you do. Because I've already notified the county district attorney's office. Deputy Fletcher is on his way here now. We've documented everything. The forged signatures, the fraudulent filings, the attempted exploitation of an elderly person. That's a felony in North Carolina. As if on cue, a patrol car pulled into my driveway. The guests parted as Deputy Fletcher, who'd been a friend of James's and had had his boat restored by us 3 years ago, walked down toward the dock. Brandon ran. He actually tried to run. He made it maybe 10 feet before Thomas, who'd played linebacker in college 40 years ago, tackled him into the grass. The champagne bottles Nicole had brought crashed to the dock, fizzing their contents into the lake. What happened next felt like a dream, or maybe a nightmare. Deputy Fletcher read Brandon his rights while guests whispered and recorded on their phones. Catherine presented her evidence. Nicole collapsed onto a dock chair, sobbing. I didn't know, Mom. I swear I didn't know. Part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me wanted to gather my daughter in my arms and tell her it would be okay. But another part, the part that had been violated and stolen from, couldn't quite reach her yet. How could you not know? I asked quietly. How could you look at your childhood home, at your father's life's work, and think the best thing was to sell it, to put me in some sterile apartment where I die slowly without purpose? He said you were drowning. He showed me the business books. Said you were losing money every month. He said the property taxes were eating your savings. He made spreadsheets, showed me projections. He said if we didn't act, you'd lose everything anyway, but it would be messier, more painful. And you never thought to ask me, to look at the actual books with me, to trust that I might know my own financial situation. She had no answer for that. Because the truth was simple and devastating. She'd believed a man she'd known for 8 months over her own mother. She'd believed that I was incompetent, that I needed saving, that my 67 years of living and working and building something meaningful had left me helpless. As they put Brandon in the patrol car, as Catherine explained what would happen next with the legal proceedings, as our guests slowly filtered away with shocked expressions and sympathetic touches to my shoulder, Thomas pulled me aside. How are you? He asked simply. I don't know, I admitted. I feel like I've lost her all over again. First to the divorce, now to this. Who is she? She's your daughter. And she's a woman who just had her world shattered by a con man who saw her vulnerability and exploited it. Should I forgive her? Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Eventually, maybe. But not today. Today you should feel angry. You should feel betrayed. Because you were. Let yourself feel that. So I did. I stood on my dock. The same dock where I'd said goodbye to James 2 years ago. Where I'd taught Nicole to fish when she was 5. Where I'd watched countless sunsets and believed my life was full of people who loved me. And I let myself feel the full weight of what had almost happened. Someone I'd created, carried, raised, had looked at me and seen an obstacle instead of a person, had partnered with a predator to take away everything I had left. The fury was clean and bright and clarifying. And in that fury, I found something I'd lost in the fog of grief, my own strength. The legal proceedings took 3 months. Brandon was charged with elder fraud, forgery, and attempted theft by deception. He took a plea deal, 3 years in prison and restitution for the legal fees I'd incurred. The court also ordered him to pay back the Virginia woman he'd defrauded years before. Nicole wasn't charged. Catherine convinced the DA that she'd been manipulated, that she genuinely believed she was helping. But the court did mandate counseling and required her to pay back the money she'd taken from my accounts over the months she'd been helping with bills. I didn't see her for 6 months after that day. She called weekly, sometimes daily, leaving voicemails that started with anger, then moved to justification, and finally settled into tearful apologies. I couldn't answer. Every time I heard her voice, I saw her standing on my dock, smiling as Brandon announced plans to destroy everything I loved. Thomas thought I was being too hard on her. She made a mistake, he said one evening as we watched the sun set over the water. A terrible mistake, but people can change. Can they? I asked. Or do we just want to believe they can because the alternative is too painful? He didn't have an answer for that. The business thrived without Nicole and Brandon's help. I hired Marcus, a young boat builder who'd apprenticed with James years ago, to handle the heavier restoration work. I brought in Sarah, a retired accountant, to help with the books. Together, we restored 6 boats that year, each one a small victory over the people who'd tried to take this away from me. But I'd be lying if I said I was happy. Some nights I'd lie awake in the bedroom James and I had shared for 40 years, in the house we'd built together, and I'd feel utterly alone. My husband was gone. My daughter was gone too, in a different way, but just as permanent. The life I'd imagined, the one where Nicole would eventually take over the business and pass it to Emma, where I'd die surrounded by family who loved this place as much as I did. That future had died on the dock that day. Then, one afternoon, almost a year after the confrontation, Emma appeared at my workshop door. She was 7 now, taller, wearing a little life jacket. "Grandma?" she said quietly. "Can you teach me about boats?" I looked past her to Nicole, who stood by her car, uncertain. Our eyes met across the parking lot. She looked older, thinner, like the last year had carved something out of her too. "Mom said you probably don't want to see me," Emma continued. "But I told her you always said our family fixes things. You taught me that. You can fix boats that look totally broken. So maybe you can fix us too?" My heart cracked open. I knelt down to Emma's level. "Where's your mom?" "She's scared. She thinks you hate her." I looked at Nicole again. She was crying, standing beside her car like she was ready to run if I rejected her. I thought about hate, about whether I hated my daughter for what she'd done, and I realized the answer was no. I was angry. I was hurt. I was devastated by her betrayal. But underneath all of that was something else: love. Complicated, painful, persistent love. "Tell your mom to come here," I said to Emma. The conversation that followed wasn't easy. We sat on the dock, Emma between us, while Nicole explained everything. The therapy sessions where she'd unpacked how Brandon had manipulated her, playing on her fears about my age and her own financial insecurity. How he'd isolated her from her friends, from me, making her believe that everyone was blind except him. How he'd shown her doctored financial statements and convinced her the business was failing. How he'd told her that loving me meant saving me from myself. "I was so stupid," she said, her voice breaking. "I let him make me believe you were helpless. I forgot who you are. I forgot everything Dad taught us about trust and respect and seeing people clearly. Why didn't you just talk to me?" I asked. "Why didn't you show me these concerns, these fears? Why go behind my back?" "Because he convinced me you'd never listen. He said you were too proud, too stubborn. He made me believe that caring for you meant taking control from you." She looked at me, her eyes red. "I thought I was saving you, Mom. I really did. From what? From my own life. From having purpose and meaning. From being alone. From struggling. From—" She trailed off. "I know how it sounds now. I know I was wrong. I spent a year in therapy learning how wrong I was. But I can't undo it. I can only say I'm sorry and hope that someday you can forgive me." Could I? I looked at my daughter, at my granddaughter, at the lake James had loved and the workshop where his spirit still lived in every restored hull and polished brass fitting. I thought about what forgiveness meant, not forgetting, not excusing, but choosing to move forward anyway. "I'm not ready yet," I said honestly. "You broke something, Nicole. My trust. My sense of safety in my own family. That doesn't heal quickly, I know, but Emma shouldn't pay for your mistakes. If she wants to learn about boats, I'll teach her. Just like your father taught you." Nicole nodded, tears streaming. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was exactly what both of us needed. A path forward that acknowledged the past without being imprisoned by it. That was 3 years ago. Nicole and I aren't close the way we used to be. We probably never will be again, but we're rebuilding something. She comes every other weekend with Emma. She helps in the workshop, learning the business from the bottom up this time, without assumptions about what I can or cannot do. She's taking business classes, working with Catherine to understand estate planning and elder law, determined to become the kind of daughter who protects rather than exploits. Sometimes it's painful, working side by side with someone who once tried to take everything from me. But other times, when I watch her teach Emma how to sand with a grain, or when she catches my eye across the workshop and smiles tentatively, I see glimpses of the girl she used to be, the one who loved this place, who understood what it meant. Last month, Emma asked if she could have my business when I die. Not to sell it, she said quickly. To keep it. To do what great-grandpa James did. To fix broken things and make them beautiful again. I looked at Nicole, who was watching her daughter with pride and pain mixed together in her expression. What do you think, Mom? Nicole asked. Would Dad approve? I thought about James, about the way he'd protected me even after death, the way he'd seen potential dangers I couldn't imagine and built safeguards against them, about how he'd loved this business not for the money but for the purpose, the craft, the connection to something larger than himself. I think, I said slowly, that he'd say we don't know yet. Emma's 7. She might change her mind 100 times. But if she still feels this way when she's older, if she understands what this place really is and what it means to maintain it, then yes, we'll make sure the business survives for another generation. And if I prove myself? Nicole asked quietly. If I spend the next 20 years showing you I understand now, that I'll never let anyone manipulate me into hurting you again. I met her eyes. Then maybe we'll both learn what real forgiveness looks like. It's not the ending I'd imagined for my story. There's no neat resolution, no moment where everything is perfectly healed. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the real lesson isn't about revenge or justice or even forgiveness. Maybe it's about understanding that people are complicated, that love can coexist with betrayal, that trust once broken can be slowly, painstakingly rebuilt if both people are willing to do the work. I sit on my dock now, watching the sunset over the lake James loved. And I think about all the boats we've restored over the years. Every single one of them came to us, broken, damaged, written off by others as beyond saving. But James never gave up on them. He'd look at a hull full of rot and see the beautiful wood underneath. He'd find the core that was still sound and build outward from there. Maybe that's what we're doing with our family. Finding the sound core underneath all the damage, all the betrayal, all the pain. Building outward from what remains. It's not easy. Some days I'm still angry. Some days I look at Nicole and remember her standing on this dock, smiling while Brandon announced his plans to erase my life. But other days I watch her teach Emma a bowline knot. The same way James taught her. The same way his father taught him. And I see the unbroken thread that connects us all. James protected me with his will, with his foresight, with his love that extended beyond death. But maybe the greatest protection he gave me wasn't legal or financial. Maybe it was teaching me that broken things can be fixed, that rot can be cut away while preserving what's valuable. That the work of restoration is hard and slow and sometimes painful, but always, always worthwhile. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I'm 70 years old. I own a boat restoration business on a lake in North Carolina. My daughter once tried to take everything from me, and slowly, carefully, we're learning to be family again. That's my story. It's not the one I would have chosen, but it's mine. And like every boat James ever restored, it's stronger now in the places where it was broken. Not because breaking made it better, but because the work of repair taught us what really matters. Some people might say I should have cut Nicole off completely. that letting her back into my life makes me weak. But I learned something James always knew. Strength isn't about building walls. It's about knowing when to repair and when to rebuild. It's about protecting yourself while still leaving room for grace. And grace, I've discovered, is the hardest work of all. But it's also the most important. Because in the end, we're all just broken boats, hoping someone will see us as worth saving. James saw that in me. I'm learning to see it in Nicole. And maybe, if I'm very lucky, Emma will see it in both of us someday and understand that family isn't about perfection. It's about choosing to keep fixing what breaks, over and over again, until the repairs become part of the beauty.